So, you've probably guessed by now that my pet hate is these stock standard tourism videos that are done by people who have clearly never been to the place that they're trying to tell us about. And so they give misinformation. Sometimes they might get it right in a few spots, but sometimes they get it horribly wrong. Now, I came across this video some time back, and it's been just sitting in my file of videos to possibly do a reaction to. But given something that happened earlier this month down in Tassie, I thought it was a good time for me to tackle this video. And I'll explain that as I get to that point in the video. So this is another one of those videos by some random person, and this time it's like 11 things to do in Hobart, Tasmania. As you know, I'm a former Tasmanian, so when I see stuff like this, sometimes it just really pushes my buttons and I've got to react. So here we go with another one of these.
Here are the top things to do in Hobart, Australia. Be sure to watch until the end, as our #1 activity will blow your mind away.
Now, before we jump in, just looking at this image, because this is not covered in this video, is this the Tas Museum in Hobart with yet another renovation having occurred? Or is this just some random picture that they threw in that has nothing to do with Hobart?
Number 11. Go hiking at Wellington Park. It is almost impossible to look beyond Mount Wellington when considering the top attractions in Hobart. The mountain is a dominant landscape in the area and can be accessed from almost every corner of the city.
Well, actually, no. There's one road up the mountain. One narrow road up the mountain. Don't convince yourself that you can hike up the mountain from any location in the city, because that's just ridiculous. It is a steep mountain, it is a rocky mountain. If you're going to the top of the mountain, unless you happen to be a die-hard hiker and someone who does serious full-on hiking, there's no way you're going to hike to the top of the mountain. So no, there is one access to Mount Wellington if you're headed to the top, and that is via the road. You can't access from every corner of the city. And, you know, the fact that the city is only on one side of the mountain says something else.
So, it is often at the top of the list of places to visit in Tasmania. The mountain has since been adopted as a state treasure and protected by the Wellington National Park.
What a joke. Protected by the Wellington National Park. Now, I've never heard it referred to even as Wellington National Park. It's Mount Wellington. It is Crown land on the mountain, yes, but I've never heard it referred to as a national park. But the protected by Wellington National Park, that just gives me images of all these possums up in trees with slingshots ready to attack any tourists that come where they're not meant to be, or Tassie devils that are ready to jump out and attack you at the ankles if you go into the wrong spot. It's insanity.
Hence, increasing its popularity among Tasmanians. Today, a hike to the pinnacle at the summit of Mount Wellington is one of the best things to do here, and you will miss out on a lot if you don't partake in this activity.
So what happens when you get morons like this telling people on the internet that you'll miss out on a lot if you don't go hiking on Mount Wellington? Well, guess what? Earlier this month, people, like rescuers, had to go in under these conditions that you can see here and rescue 13 idiots who decided to go hiking on Mount Wellington without protective gear, without food, without shelter, without anything basically. They thought, let's go for a bit of a day hike on Mount Wellington. And the weather came in and it snowed and they got stuck, they got stranded. Not only were they putting their own lives at risk, but they were putting all the rescuers at risk as well. All these people that had to go in to rescue them and get them back out again were put at risk because someone told these morons that it was a good idea to go hiking on Mount Wellington. Just like, yeah, that's a touristy thing to do. You got to do it or you're missing out. You got to respect the area that you go to. You got to talk to locals. You got to understand what you're doing. Here's the thing. If you go to Cradle Mountain, they're not going to allow you up there for a hike unless they know that you have all the safety gear, because you need to go on a bus to get from the lodge up to the actual Cradle Mountain area. Mount Wellington, any twit can drive their car to the springs or up to the summit and take themselves on a hike. But Tasmanians know that you just don't do that, because Tasmanians are far more intelligent than that. And they know that Mount Wellington is not a place that you go hiking unless, like I said earlier, you are a die-hard serious hiker who does lots of major hikes and you understand the risks of hiking somewhere like Mount Wellington when there is a possibility of snow. Even without a possibility of snow, the weather there is unpredictable. It's windy, it's colder than Hobart. It's changeable. So, what a moron telling people to go hiking on Mount Wellington as just this happy little tourism activity. Just no, don't do it.
Don't get it twisted. Trekking this 4,200 feet high mountain is no easy task, but then you'll find it very interesting, especially if you are in a hiking group.
Sorry, it's nap time again for the Chihuahua, in case you were wondering about the noises in the background. The other thing with videos like this made by people who've never been to a location is that they have no idea when they're using a stock image or a stock video that is completely a different country.
Also, the view from the summit shows you the entire Hobart City in all its majesty, and this is something you don't want to miss. It would also interest you to know that the trail to the pinnacle of Mount Wellington is not the only hiking trail here. The park also boasts a dozen other trails, all worth exploring. So if you would rather not march up the hill, you can find short, long, and full-day hikes around the spring in the park.
Like I said, if you're a tourist, you need to do your research before you go hiking anywhere in Tasmania, because there are so many hazards in terms of weather, in terms of terrain, etc. There are so many hikes that are just not for amateurs in Tasmania. So don't just watch some random YouTube video and decide you're going to go for a hike all out Mount Wellington or whatever. Question, is this actually a viewing platform on Mount Wellington? It's been an eternity since I went up there, and I thought it was just that enclosed viewing platform. So I'd be curious to know if this actually is, or if this is just a stock image.
Number 10. Visit the Museum of Old and New Art. Known as MONA for short, the Museum of Old and New Art is one of the unique attractions in Hobart. It is also one of the top places to visit in the city, whether you are an art lover or a regular tourist. This museum is the largest privately funded museum in the Southern Hemisphere, and it has a rather sophisticated mix of antique and modern art on display. The architecture and design of the museum are mind-blowing. But the real highlight here is the modern technology used in the gallery. Here in MONA, you'll find that the exhibits are not labeled like in most other museums. Instead, you will be handed an electronic device and headphones that give you the information you need about any exhibit you scan in the museum.
I can highly recommend a trip to MONA, But I'm just going to comment based on the image that I saw just before this one. If you're going to Mona with your kids, it's one of these places where you are better off making sure that your kids are with you. Now, you've probably heard about some of the installations. They are a little bit not so politically correct, not child friendly. Now, you're not going to just stumble onto them. Those kind of installations are actually in rooms, and the rooms are labelled so that you know, and you're not going to stumble into an installation that may offend you. And it's for that reason that I say, if you go to Mona and you're taking kids, it is perfectly fine for kids. It is a great place for kids to go and explore, but I would keep them with you so that you can at least guide them away from places that you probably don't want them exposed to.
Is called Battery Point will be the least of your concerns once you start exploring the beautiful streets here. But if you must know, it was named after the battery of guns that was mounted here in 1988 as the city's coastal defense.
Okay, clearly for starters the guy doesn't know what a battery is, because if you have a look at the batteries that exist still in Tasmania, usually there's probably one big battery gun there, maybe two. It's not a battery of guns, and I've never heard it referred to in that way. In terms of Battery Point, it was only one part on the shoreline. Castray Esplanade, I believe, was the location of a battery called Mulgrave Battery, which was actually built in 1818, not 1988. So Battery Point is the area around the battery.
Surely a tour of the suburb will bring you past some outstanding 19th century sandstone buildings and weatherboard structures that will leave you amazed. Also, you wouldn't want to miss the popular Kelly's Steps built to link the lower and higher grounds of the suburb. You will also come across the circular park at Arthur Circus, one of the best places to relax and take in the beauty of the water.
Sure, if you climb that big tree in the middle of the park, and you can actually see through all the leaves, you just might be able to see the water from there. As for sitting in the park to look at the water, nah, that whole street is circular. It is houses all around. All you're going to see in that park is those houses. Even if the houses on the bottom side were see-through, all you would see would be more buildings, more shops, etc. So, yeah, nah, you're not going to see the water from there.
Number 8. Day trip to Bruny Island. Bruny Island is a 140 square mile island in Tasmania, separated from the mainland by a river channel. The island is divided into two parts by a sandy isthmus, and it features a large hill from which you can see both parts. The island is one of the top day trips from Hobart, and its popularity is helped by the fact that it is at the end of a fun boat trip.
I'm not sure that I would refer to the Bruny Island ferry as being a fun boat trip. You drive on, you sit in your car for the most part, and you go across the channel. It's a very short trip. There's not a lot that happens.
Indeed, if you want a time out from the city, this island is your best destination. The island has some beautiful landscapes, including rugged highlands and serene beaches, and you can also spot penguins here on some evenings. Plus, you may want to climb up the 238 steps to the lookout on the hill to get a good glance at all the attractions on the island.
Okay, the island's not that small, and while that does sound like a lot of steps, it's still not a great elevation. So when you get up there, you're going to see the beaches down below you on the spit, and you're going to see off in the distance the hills and everything. You're not going to be able to see all the attractions on the island.
Number 7. Take a cruise on the River Derwin. As expected from any coastal city, Hobart features some pretty impressive waterside attractions, and you may want to check out a few. The River Derwent is one of the dominant water bodies in the city, and it is one you should explore during your stay here. The 124-mile-long river flows from the Tasmanian highlands down through the city into the Tasman Sea. Of course, you should join a guided tour on a boat cruise down the river and explore the forested banks that once housed Aboriginals. You will also pass through a mix of industries and recreational spots on this fantastic boat cruise to make it all the more fun and unforgettable.
Okay, well, I will say a Derwent River cruise is definitely something worth doing. Don't expect it to be quite as broad as that. Usually these cruises are like for an hour or so, so for the most part you're going to go past Sandy Bay, you're going to see all the houses on the hills, go past West Point for casino, you might see trees and stuff on the hills, but that's about it. You're not going to go hiking in the bush for starters. You don't get off at all on these cruises. But yeah, definitely worth checking out. If you've got a bit of money in the budget and you're headed to Tasmania, Derwent River cruises are definitely worth it.
Number 6. Go shopping at the Salamanca Markets. Tasmania boasts some remarkable markets thanks to its rising population of artisans, growers, and producers. But then, not many of these markets can compare to the Salamanca Markets in popularity. This famous market is located here in Hobart and is the best place to relate with the locals. The market has several shops open on weekdays, but it is only fully operational on Saturdays.
And again, spoken by someone who doesn't have a clue. The market only is on Saturdays. Yes, you have Salamanca Place, which is the location where the market is held on a Saturday. And at Salamanca Place, there are shops all along Salamanca Place that do sell very touristy goods, very, very expensive touristy goods. So they have, like, you know, a place that, I think there used to be a place that sold all this wood stuff. There's probably a place that sells, you know, knitted jumpers and stuff like that. All the kind of touristy, overpriced stuff that you can actually get way cheaper elsewhere. Yes, you can find that at Salamanca Place. But that's not Salamanca Market. And there's only one market. It's not Salamanca Markets, plural. So, yeah, once again, someone who's got no idea what they're talking about.
On this market day, it is not business as usual, as you'll find hundreds of extra open-air stalls filled with local produce anywhere you turn. No doubt you'll be amazed by the cordial relationship between sellers and buyers as they transact. Well, you can join in on the fun and purchase souvenirs of the handcrafted goods sold here for yourself too. And thanks to the fantastic restaurants here, you can also grab a tasty bite to keep you energized as you stroll through the busy market. Number 5. Do a wine tour. You might have heard that Tasmania is one of the best Australian regions for wine production, and this is certainly not a myth. That said, you already know you'll be doing a couple of wine tasting activities whenever you come to visit. Luckily, you don't have to stray far away to get to this experience, as Hobart also has its fair share of wineries. So all you need to do is go on a wine tour around the city and delight your taste buds with a taste of quality wines. Luckily, there are wine tasting programs in this park that offer a full-day tour of the wineries in Hobart and beyond, and you can rest assured of a blissful experience that will leave you asking for more.
My recommendation, if you're a tourist and you're headed to Tassie, then ask locals about what are good wineries. And just go and do a winery tour at those wineries. Don't do one of these all-day tours, because the thing is, yes, Tasmanian wines do really well on the world stage. There are some utterly fantastic Tasmanian wines, but honestly, at the same time, there are some utterly disgusting Tasmanian wines too. And if you're going on a full day tour, chances are what you're paying for is this is probably put together by a bunch of wineries who have basically teamed together to try and bring business their way, and you don't know what sort of quality you're getting. Save your money, ask a local what are some of the good wineries to go to, and go to one or two of those ones. And then you might even have money left over to buy yourself a bottle of something nice to take home with you.
Number 4. Mountain biking at Mount Wellington. Adventurers are often thrilled about visiting Hobart, as there are more than a few mind-blowing activities to partake in here. If you are a fan of mountain biking, then you will be delighted by the epic downhill track at the base of Mount Wellington. This track is one of the best mountain biking spots in the country, and it is often compared to the downhill in Queensland, New Zealand. You certainly do not need a second invitation to get your bike ready and head up to Mount Wellington, where you'll find many other mountain bikers. But then, if you do not fancy your chances on the trail, you can watch from the sidelines as the experts flaunt their skills and stunts.
Once again, stock footage. There's no beach on Mount Wellington. Let's just get that clear. Now, in terms of mountain bike riding, you need to also do your research, because there are some spots that are designated walking tracks. So you can't just randomly go out with a mountain bike and ride on the tracks on Mount Wellington. You need to actually do it through the right avenues. I believe there are some touristy kind of places that do offer mountain bike riding on Mount Wellington, or around the lower hills. But yeah, don't expect it to be something where you just go and randomly take yourself there, because like I said, there are designated walking tracks where you can't just go and ride your mountain bike. And as for this notion of just going along as a spectator, good luck with that. Mount Wellington is full of trees. I'm not sure where you're going to spectate, because other than standing at the finishing line, wherever that is, and then you get to see maybe 1 minute of someone riding down a hill going across the finish line, and I can't imagine that many people would even fit into an area like that. I don't know much about mountain biking, but knowing Mount Wellington, I can't see it as being a spectator sport.
Number 3. Take a view of the city from Mount Nelson. Mount Wellington is undoubtedly Hobart's dominant peak and offers the city's best view. But there's another impressive lookout worth visiting in this park. If you are looking for a less imposing summit from which to get a good view of the city, you may want to consider the Mount Nelson Lookout. Of course, it's not as high as the summit at Mount Wellington, but it features a historical signal station at an ideal height. From here, you will not only be greeted with a good view of the city, but you can also see a portion of the breathtaking harbor.
I tend to think of Mount Nelson as being more of a kind of a backup plan. If it's too cloudy to go up the mountain, or if it's snowing on the mountain so you can't get all the way up, then Mount Nelson does give you a fairly good view of Hobart. But it really does pale in comparison to going up Mount Wellington. So if you've gone up Mount Wellington and you've braved the weather to go and have a look there, then you probably don't need to go up Mount Nelson. There's not a lot else up there. So you're driving 20 minutes out of the city just for a lookout that is not as good as Mount Wellington. Just my thoughts.
Number 2. Marvel at the impressive Wellington Falls. Just when you think you have seen enough of Hobart's natural wonders, you will find out that the city also features some impressive cascades. Of course, they are all worth visiting, and you can embark on a waterfall tour to see them all. However, if you have limited time to spare, you might want to single out the Wellington Waterfall, which is arguably the best of the bunch. Falling from a mesmerizing height off Mount Wellington, the crystal clear water is a spectacle to behold, and you'll find the surrounding landscape equally incredible.
Okay, what you need to know about that is that it is a 16 kilometre or 25 kilometre round trip, depending on which location you depart from. And it is a uphill climb on kind of rough ground. So it's not just a random stroll through the bush, little ways down the track and there's this waterfall. It's a serious hike. It's like an all-day hike. You're talking about, 5 hours or more. And if you're not an experienced hiker, then once again, you've got to take into consideration weather conditions, etc. My recommendation would be, if you have access to a vehicle, head down to National Park and go check out Russell Falls. That's a nice, easy walk for anyone. I haven't been to Wellington Falls, so I couldn't say how they compare, but Russell Falls is certainly worth the trip, and if you're not a hiker, then that's definitely the better option.
If you want to learn about this unique flora, then you should head up to the Royal Tasmanian Botanic Gardens in Hobart, covering a total land area of about 14 hectares. This garden is Australia's cool climate garden, and it features a vast collection of local and imported plants. Of course, a tour around the garden will leave you amazed by the plethora of plant life on display here. You will also come across a sub-Antarctic plant house here, which is the first of its kind in Australia.
And again, the problem with doing a video about a place that you've never been to, this image is not the sub-Antarctic plant house. This is actually the conservatory. And if you have a look, you can see all the roof is glass. This is actually where you find the more tropical plants at the Botanical Gardens. And yes, it's called the Botanical Gardens, not the Botanic Gardens. So, and I will say, the conservatory is so worth going into because it has a fountain. I think it's got a few water features from memory. And it is just a really calm, relaxing place to wander through. But it is definitely not sub-Antarctic.
In all, you'll find your visit here both educational and entertaining, and it will certainly be one of the highlights of your stay in Hobart.
I will say the Botanical Gardens is well worth a visit if you are headed to Tasmania. It's just a nice, relaxing way to spend your day. There's certainly so many spots that you can walk around, and there's a cafeteria, there's a restaurant, there's a little souvenir shop, or you could just take a picnic with you and have a picnic lunch somewhere on the grounds. There's plenty of places to sit, and that's what most people do. If they go to the Botanical Gardens, they plan it around lunchtime so they can sit somewhere and have a nice picnic. So this is that video. Once again, yeah, I get frustrated with people when they do videos about places they've never been to, and especially when it comes to places that I am familiar with. So I just had to chirp up and have my say. Thanks for listening. If you're new, please subscribe. Please hit the like button and please leave a comment below. They're the things that help me get out into the algorithm and help me get seen by more people.